Hello everyone and welcome to Module 4 Video 2. In this video we're going to talk about how to honour the ancestors. So one of the most important ways in which we can honour ancestors is to create ourselves an ancestor shrine. Okay, so this is going to be part of your homework this week, is to set up an ancestor shrine. Now, the first question to ask is what direction do we set it up? Where do we want to put it? So we want to put it in the north, okay, or facing towards the north, okay? This is because that is the direction of hell in the lore, and so that's where the ancestors are. If you put it in the north, then you're honoring them in the north. Now, you don't have to put it in the north, but that's sort of the recommendation. Okay, an important place is, or important thing is to put it in a central place in the home. Okay, ideally somewhere where the family might gather is best, especially if you've got the whole of your family is heathen, because then it sort of makes the ancestors feel as though they're part of the family. Okay, try not to put it in the bedroom if possible. Okay, if that's the only place, then okay, but ideally you don't want to put it in your bedroom. Now, the first thing to do when setting up your ancestor altar is you want to cleanse it. Okay, so get some salt water and just rub down over the surface you're going to use. You may want to put an altar cloth maybe on there as well, and also put some perfumes or essential oils on there. Things like rosemary is a good one. It's sort of to do with memory and the ancestors and things. So any sort of essential oil or perfume that can be thought of as ancestor honoring. It could be things like Florida water and stuff like that as well. And then you want certain things on that altar. And again, this is coming back to what we talked about in the last module about altars. So water, you need to have some water on your altar, okay, in a bowl or something. And this represents, or it's not represents, this is it's a liminal thing that allows communication between the other world, the ancestors' world, and our world, okay? It is the means by which you send communication to them and they bring communication back to you, okay? So you need to have some sort of water on there. And I would suggest having a bowl of water on there, which can represent the Well of Weird, or just a bowl of water. And then you also want some shot glasses that you can pour like offerings into. So whether that's water, whiskey, all that sort of stuff, okay? You want to have a fire on there. As we've talked about before, fire is a symbol of hospitality. It is you're inviting the ancestors from what potentially may be a cold world into this nice warmth, giving them warmth through the fire, giving them light to light their way to get to you, that sort of thing. Okay, so you want to have a white main candle, okay, on your altar. And then you may also want to have other types of candles as well. So you could say have 3 tea light candles, one for your ancestors of blood, one for your ancestors of place, one for your ancestors of spirit or tribe. Okay, so you've got three potentially small candles as well, or you could just have 1 candle or 2 candles, however you want to do it. You could potentially even have 4 candles, and you could 4 small ones. One for your mother's mothers, one for your mother's fathers, one for your father's fathers, one for your father's mothers, that sort of thing. So you decide what you want to do in terms of the candles. Now, you also want to have images and mementos, okay, of the dead. So it could be pictures of what they look like in life. It could be items that they had that you want to put on the altar. Whatever you do, they don't put any images with living people on it in there, because essentially the altar represents the land of the dead. If you're putting an image on there of someone who's alive, you're essentially putting them into the land of the dead, and that could have influence on their lives. You also possibly might want a statue of Hel or Odin. Hel, because she's the ruler of the underworld of Hel, and Odin, he's the psychopomp who's thought to maybe transport souls to the dead, or at least that was one of his original roles. Then you might want to do some other things. So you might want to put a family tree on there, or a tablet. So in sort of Chinese and Korean practice, they put tablets for each individual that's died with the names of that ancestor on it. So you may want to do that, or you might want to have a book of names. So every ancestor that you're aware of, you could write their name and some details about them in a book, and you could place that on the altar. As we said, belongings of the dead, if they died and had particular things in their house, particularly jewelry maybe they wore, or important things to them, you can put that sort of stuff on the altar. You could put ashes or graveyard dirt. So if they've died and you've got their ashes, you could put that on there. If you've got graveyard dirt from their graves, you could put that on there. Or if you're doing magical practice and you're collecting graveyard dirt in general, you can collect that and put that there. I would suggest you have a plate for food or fruit offerings. Okay, a plate on the altar so you can put offerings there. An incense holder, so you can burn incense for the ancestors. We saw that for the Anglo-Saxons, the church condemned burning grain for them. So maybe you want to burn some grains for the ancestors. And there's lots of other things you can think about as well. You could have a message box where you write prayers to the dead or messages to the dead, put them in there, and then the dead will read them. You could have bones or skulls. So I like to have a fake human skull on the altar, but you can have any type of skull or bones. Anything that's death imagery. You could have statues of things, maybe a statue of, like we said, Hel or Odin or some other deity of the dead. Flowers are always nice. They also send, because they wilt quite quickly, they send this image of, or they emphasize to you that life is impermanent, that it's fleeting, that everything must die. It's sort of a memento mori, so a remembering that you're going to die type thing. Also, if you're going to do flowers, maybe try and think of flowers that either were ones that your ancestors really enjoyed, or that are funerary flowers. Okay. Now, so you get your altar, you set it up in the north, you put the basic things on it that you want to put on it. What do you then do? Okay. So you start by regularly tending your shrine. Okay. So this is what I would suggest you do as like a basic practice for honoring your ancestors. Okay. So you start off, you go to your altar, you light your candle. Okay. You refresh any water that you've got. So you take old water off, you put new water in there for them. Then you put out some offering, sorry. And when you've done that, you then bow. Okay. Now I'd recommend maybe bowing 3 times. This just gets you into that mindset of respect and reverence and worship. Okay. Perhaps you might call on the psychopomp. So you might call on Odin, or you might call on Hel. Okay. And then you can start saying your prayers. So you say your prayers to and or for the ancestors. So it could be you're asking for something, or you're praying for their peace, or whatever. You can then say your prayers. Okay. And then once you've done that, then just spend some time listening in silence and see if they communicate back to you. Okay. See what you feel in your body, see what you hear in your mind, that sort of stuff. And maybe spend some time talking to them. So in the morning, say, good morning, ancestors. Maybe you want to tell them about your day. Build sort of that relationship as you would if they were alive with you. Okay. And once you've developed that rapport, okay, once you've established that, then you can start asking for help or for favors, but don't just go in straight away and ask for help and favors. Okay. The first thing is about getting a strong relationship built with your ancestors and proving that you're going to be there, offering them things for them and stuff like that, and listening to them, and then you can start asking for things. Okay. So that's what I would suggest you do. You tend to shrine regularly, maybe daily, maybe weekly. Thursdays are always good for doing that. Light your candle, refresh the water, put out offerings, bow, call on Odin, and then say your prayers. And then listen in silence. Okay, so sort of 7 things to do. Okay. When it comes to offerings, what are we going to give the ancestors? And I'm going to suggest you give 5 things. Okay. Now, these can be 5 things that you can give actually for not just the ancestors, but all types of spirits. But let's talk about these 5 main things. So, flowers, food, drink, scent, and fire, which is like warmth and light. Okay. So, the most important of these are water and fire. Okay. water, so they've got something to drink, although you can give other things like coffee, tea, alcohol, that sort of stuff. If they were an alcoholic in life, do not give them alcohol. But if they weren't, then it's perfectly fine. Definitely, yeah, fire as well, because you need to be showing your hospitality and giving them warmth and the energy from that. You can give them things that they enjoyed in life. So maybe you give them, like I said, tea and coffee. Maybe it's sweets or chocolate. They do like sweet things. Fruits like oranges particularly because they last a long time. And they're also associated much with winter, which is great. Apples are seen as, particularly in the lore, as symbols of immortality and life-giving. So apples are always a good one. If they had any favorite foods, give them those. You could cook them a special meal. And then, yeah, alcohol, particularly things if they really enjoy a particular type of alcohol. Incense. So incense, I think, is really important, okay, because incense, the smell will attract spirits or repel spirits, okay. There's a lot of examples in history of pagans using incense to attract spirits, okay. And so particularly you can use things like frankincense and myrrh. So incense can be, if you're not properly having your windows open and stuff like that, it can impact on your lungs and stuff. So you need to be careful about that. So what I suggest, if you don't want to do that, is use essential oils. You can get like a burner where you put some water and essential oil in the top, and you have underneath you have your tea light candle, and then that just sends off the smell that way. Okay, so essential oils are a more environmentally friendly and probably a more health respecting way of doing things. Okay, so you might want to use things like rose, again, frankincense, because frankincense and myrrh are associated with the dead as well. Okay, as is rosemary, marjoram, basil, things like that. Okay, so incense is another thing that you can use as an offering to attract the spirits. Okay, flowers, as I said, traditional funerary flowers are good ones, ones that they really enjoyed in life, and let it send the message to your subconscious about the impermanence of life and the memento mori. Okay, the remembering you're going to die. Also, if you're having a meal, and there's a lot of cultures that do this, if you have a meal, you give some of that meal, maybe the first little portion of it, to your ancestors. Okay, so if you're eating a particular meal, just do a little portion to the side on the altar, and that's for your ancestors. When it comes to water, it's really important that you're changing your water daily, if at all possible, and definitely every couple of days. Okay, don't leave it for weeks and weeks on end, because it will just go a bit not very nice. Okay, and then it'll stop you being able to communicate with them and then communicate with you, and sending of power to help you. Okay, so you want to make sure that water is changed daily. Remember, it's something that they potentially might drink, so it needs to be nice water. Water left out like that can taste horrible after a while. My recommendation is leave offerings out for around 24 hours and then dispose of them in the bin or in the compost. Ideally the compost, because that's the eco-friendly thing to do. But you can put it in the bin if you need to. Okay. And I also recommend that you feed them at least once a week. So I would say maybe on a Thursday, you do a sort of ancestor ritual, go through those things that we said about tending the altar, and give them a bit of food at that point as well. Regularly feeding them, then they stay happy. Okay. And then think about special dates when you can honor them. So not just once a week or once a day or whatever, but think about special days. So for instance, when was their birthday? When did they die? What day did they die? So their death anniversary. Your own birthday is a really good time to honor your personal ancestors, your family ancestors, because that day came about because of them. Another time I really like to do it is the first crescent moon. Okay, so it's the start of the month. You can then honor them and pray for their help during the coming month. they are part of your family, okay? So on important family event days, maybe weddings, christenings, births of babies, any special day you celebrate as a family, okay? If you celebrate any of the festivals or holy days, and we are going to talk about them in a later module, but on special festivals, Christmas, for instance, and things like that, Yule, winter nights, etc. And also New Year. New Year is also a good time to honor the ancestors, particularly when we talk about the Modru, the mothers. There was the Anglo-Saxons would honor them on their New Year's Eve. Okay, and they could be seen as almost ancestral in spirits. We'll explore that in a bit more depth next time, but New Year is a good time as well. So there's lots of days when you might want to think about honoring the ancestors. Okay, and on those days, you want to give them something extra. So don't just give them the normal things you would give them. Give them something extra. Maybe that is the time to cook a meal for them. Okay, cook a meal and give them some. Okay, so let's have a look at the ways you could set up your altar and what different cultures do to give you some ideas of things that you can do. Okay, so let's start with the top right, top left there. Okay, so this is a Korean ancestor ceremony. They honor their ancestors in 2 times majorly during the year. One is at New Year's, okay, and one is at the harvest festival. So those are the 2 times when they have these big ceremonies. And what they do is they lay out these, well, they cook elaborate meals and they lay them out on the altars like that. Okay, and there's food cooked, there's drink, there's rice wine, there's you can see the tablets with the names of their ancestors on it. They dress up really nicely. They bow down before their ancestors, and they just really, really respect their ancestors. And then they'll even leave the room. So they do their ceremony. They lay out all the food and everything. Then they leave the room and give the ancestors time to eat the food in peace. Okay, and drink the drink in peace. Okay. Below that, we've already sort of seen this one, but below that is an old Roman larium, okay, where they honor what's called the lares, or the household gods and spirits. Okay, and in that they make a little house type thing in the wall for them. They've got a picture of various ancestors and house spirits, and then they often put like drinks and things on them. But what you could do is you could have a picture that represents those ancestors or spirits. Okay. Now in the top middle, you've got a Mexican Day of the Dead. So again, the Day of the Dead is a time when you might be able to, or might want to honor ancestors. Same with Halloween and things like that. And you can see lots of things they do here. So firstly, they make an altar of lots of layers. Okay, and they've got pictures of all their different ancestors. And then they've got candles, and they've got skulls, and they've got these orange flowers, which are marigolds, I believe, calendulas, as sort of offerings for the ancestors, and they put food out and drink out and stuff like that. So that's another thing you might want to do. Okay. Below that, we've got a Buddhist altar. And this one, it sort of opens up. So you can see there's doors on the side there. They open it up, and inside you've got the things like you've got your incense burner, you've got your lights and candles, you've got your flowers, offerings and things like that. Okay. In the top right there, you've got a variety of things. So this isn't just an ancestor altar, but this is like a combination altar. But it does include some pictures of ancestors there that you can see. And you've got your fruits and your drinks and your candles and your incense and your pictures there. Okay. And then below that, we've got another ancestor altar with some interesting things. This is a much more modern altar, but it's got a lot of the same important things that we've talked about. So it's got your ancestor picture. Okay. It's got your candle. It's got food offerings. It's got things that they liked in life, like vices like cigarettes and stuff like that. It's got perfumes and makeup and personal items, purses, books, that sort of stuff that they suggest. You can have a plant to represent the family tree, or you can have a picture of a family tree, like where you've actually written out the names and everything. So you could have that. You've got a book of names, or a book of relatives' names, which you could put on the altar like it's got there. It's got the water. It follows the idea of the Chinese that they burn ancestor money and they burn ancestor paper, joss paper it's called, which can be money or can have items on it that they believe that will then go to the afterlife and the ancestors can use those things in the afterlife. So you could have that sort of stuff on your altar and burn that to them. So there's lots of different ways of setting up an altar for the ancestors. There's lots of different things you can put on it. You need to make it your own. You need to think about what will respect the ancestors, what will be nice looking, what will be beautiful for them. Just so basically you want to show them that you're honoring them, okay? Okay, so that's different ancestor altars to inspire you for what you want to do. Okay, so let's have a look at some other ideas other than an altar for ways you can honor your ancestors. So firstly, there's genealogical research, okay? So you want to research them and find out their names and stories, okay? So this starts with talking to any parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles that are still alive. Get as much information as you can out of them about different ancestors and their stories. You can go on websites like, I don't know, ancestry.com, ancestry.co.uk. There's lots of other ones as well. Some you have to pay for, some are free. And you can find out a lot of information that way. You can go and actually visit places, visit graves. You can order birth certificates and death certificates and things like that to get information. There's lots of things you can do to find out about your family history, okay? And I'd recommend maybe getting a book on family history to give you lots of, sort of point you in the right directions for things. And then once you found out these stories and their names and everything, you can tell others about their lives, okay? So it keeps them alive by, it keeps their memory alive by telling others about them. One thing that's really big in some cultures is visiting their graves and cleaning them. So obviously we like to visit their graves maybe on an anniversary or something and maybe put flowers, which essentially are offerings, okay? But you might want to go and actually clean them and make the grave look nice. You might want to share some food with them. So you basically want to make sure their gravesite is kept tidy and looks good, okay? You can even burn grain at their graves, just like it said the Anglo-Saxons did. You could try and have some sort of ceremony at their graves, although I don't know how much you'll be able to get away with that. But you could try. Learn about their history, their culture, their art and music and folk traditions, and their food, okay? Particularly if they're not ancestors that are close now and they come from a different country or different culture or anything like that, and you don't know much about them. Learn about that, okay? Because when you understand them better, you can have a better relationship with them. Maybe create some sort of memorial art, okay? So we often do that to honor the dead. You might go somewhere and there's a big wall with people's names on, or there's a big statue to a particular dead person, things like that. So, but you don't have to make something big like that. You can have something small on your altar or in your house, okay? Maybe you want to do some, I don't know, embroidery about the ancestor or something like that, or a picture or painting or something. If you have children, you pass on your DNA, but you're passing on your ancestors' DNA. So that, again, is another way of honoring your ancestors. You can pray for your ancestors, particularly for those who haven't fully moved on. If you think that if they've died in a bad way or something, you can pray for them, you can help them, even those that may not know what's happened to them. And you just want to pray for any ancestors in general where that's happened. You can pray for them, okay? You pray to Odin to help them move on to hell and to the good place, okay? Now, in later folklore, we have this idea of sitting out in a cemetery, this is in Scandinavia, for 3 consecutive Thursday nights. And then you become more attuned to their presence. So you may want to do this, okay? This is also a way that folklore says that you can get a house spirit as well, or you can become a magical practitioner. So this idea of 3 nights sat out in a cemetery or at crossroads on Thursdays to achieve certain things with the spirits is quite well known across a lot of folklore, okay, for Scandinavia. So maybe you want to do that. You could consider doing something called a dumb supper, which is essentially where you you do a big meal, okay, and you leave spaces like chairs for the ancestors as well to come. You invite them in, and then you sit in silence and you eat respectfully and you think about your ancestors, okay? That's a dumb supper. You can, if you want to get communication back from the ancestors, maybe you can do some divination, maybe things using runes or some other method, and do divination, ask your ancestors questions, use the runes to get an answer. And then utiseta, you could go out and find an ancestor's grave or even a grave mound if you have them, and you could sleep on them. And well, before you sleep on them, ask the ancestor or the being that's in the grave to give you a dream or something that you want, and then sleep and see what happens, okay? I suggest you have learnt to try and remember your dreams before you do this. So like we said in the module last time, module 3, you need to learn to remember your dreams. So you want to do that, okay, first before you do utiseta. Okay, just some issues to consider here. So what happens if you're adopted? Who do you honor? What's the protocol at this point? So basically, you can choose which ones to honor. Okay, so you could choose either to honor your birth family or your adopted family, or both, the ancestors of both if you want. Obviously, if it's your birth family, you'll have to do quite a lot more research to finding who they are and stuff. But you can honor both families. You can just choose to honor one or the other. Okay. Because once you're adopted, you're essentially into a new family. So you'll become part of that new family, and therefore their ancestors are your ancestors, even though there's not direct blood. There's a spiritual blood relationship there. If we think back through history, actually, many people were adopted in the past because health was much worse, and so parents would die and stuff, and so the kids would have to go and live with a relative or with another family, and would therefore naturally be honoring their ancestors instead. So adoption means that you can choose who to honor, basically. What about abusive ancestors? So not everybody has nice families. Well, firstly, you have many more ancestors that you can honor than just the few that were abusive to you, okay? Your ancestors are in the thousands and millions and go back through time. Okay, so find ancestors that you want to honor, okay? And we can see that the Germanic peoples themselves, they didn't just worship all ancestors, okay? They only seemed to honor the ones they considered worthy. So the unworthy ones, the ones that they feared, the ones that were dangerous, they called revenants, okay? And so they didn't honor those. And so it's fine for you not to honor certain ancestors, okay? Lakuta, in The Return of the Dead, he writes, the good dead returned to sacred status, became a relay between the living and the gods, and watched over the clan. So we're talking here about the good dead, okay? And then there's the bad dead as well, which you just ignore or protect yourself against. And ancestors doesn't just refer to blood ancestors. We saw how the cult of the dead was really important. So it may be that there are ancestors of the particular place you live in that you really want to honor instead, okay? And that's perfectly fine, all right? And just remember that is that when we're honoring ancestors, we aren't just honoring blood ancestors, okay? You can honor both, honor your blood ancestors, also honor your ancestors of place, of spirit, of culture, okay? The cult of the dead is an important practice. As I said before about putting photos on your altar, do not put photos of living people on the altar. You are essentially putting them into the land of the dead, okay? And you don't want to be doing that. What if you've got Christian ancestors? In fact, most of us will have Christian ancestors. Well, in that case, you're going to have to make a decision. So most ancestors, I would say, probably want to be honored, whether they're Christians or not, because they want to be respected. They want to be looked after in the afterlife. They want to have stuff from you, basically, and they're still going to be concerned about you and want to look after you. It may be that they also think that ancestor veneration is sinful. They haven't changed their mind just because they're dead, and therefore you don't honor them. But that's something that maybe you want to communicate with the ancestor to find out what they want to do. Use some divination and see. If they're really hardline Christian ancestors, definitely do this. Definitely do the divination first to check. Okay. Has the ancestor passed over, or are they still a hungry ghost? You need to think about this. Okay. So many cultures, they have a period of time, often a year, that allows them to get to the underworld. Okay. It allows the dead to get to the underworld. And there's still a journey, okay, that they go through. The Norse have this. Okay. They have you go through essentially the 9 realms of the underworld to get there. And you can see the gods go on journeys where they have to ride a horse through various worlds and stuff until they get to hell. So there is a journey, okay? Sometimes they can linger in a place, though, okay? If you immediately start honoring them immediately after death, they may choose to stay and linger in around rather than go to the afterlife, to hell, okay? So try not to make offerings to ghosts, okay? Or people that have literally just died, okay? You maybe do something at the funeral and then wait for a period while they take their time to get to the underworld, and then you can start honoring them then, okay? Well, that's one way of looking at it. We don't know for sure if that's the case, but that's one way of looking at it, okay? Do what you feel fits right with you in this one. Another thing to think about is it's okay to set boundaries, okay? Your life is your life. It's not your ancestors' life, okay? You don't have to do everything they tell you. You don't have to live up to everything they want for you, okay? You can set boundaries and say no if necessary, okay? They will have particular opinions on things, just like any human does. You don't have to obey their opinions. You can set boundaries and say, no, that's not there. Say to them, like, no, you don't get a say on this type thing. Okay. Also, let them talk back. Okay, don't just talk to them, actually let them talk back. So whether that's through dreams, whether that's through divination, so using your divination sets, maybe you might sense their presence when you're talking to them, or a smell or something that reminds you of them. And you know then that they're with you or they're in that place, okay? Consider also calling on a psychopomp, for instance, Odin, okay, to help with your ancestor work. Give him offerings. He can help take souls of the dead back to the dead, back to hell and stuff. So yeah, consider calling on a psychopomp when you're doing ancestor work. All right. Okay, so that's the house spirit. Sorry, that's the ancestors cover. We're next going to talk about the house spirits, and we'll talk about that in the next video.